Are you an investigative professional? Did you know you can find the best private investigator resources using investigatorstoolbox.com? This resource community was built exclusively for licensed investigators and investigative professionals. You can network directly with members, educate yourself through free webinars and blogs, and even create your own customizable research library. Membership starts for as little as 49 cents a day. Download the Investigator's Toolbox app or visit our webpage at www.investigators-toolbox.com.
Is a good case management system keeping you from taking your business to the next level? Crosstracks is the premier case management system for the investigative community. They're the only SOC 2 certified case management software available. Visit crosstracks.com, tell them you're a listener, and save even more. Get a plan in place for the new year to grow your business to the next level. Thanks for listening to PI Perspectives. Today, we welcome Jan Barefoot back to the program. We discuss how to investigate capital murder cases. Jan has over 30 years' experience handling these cases and is a wealth of knowledge. Please welcome Jan Barefoot and your host, private investigator Matt Spaier.
And welcome everyone to this week's episode of PI Perspectives. We are back live this week. I want to thank everybody for tuning in last week and listening to what I thought was a great rerun, the roundtable of investigators. But today we're back, and we're actually having another former guest back on, who I promised we would have back on. I want to welcome Jan Barefoot back to the program. Jan, how are you?
I'm great, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right. Definitely, it's been a crazy few weeks, and it's been just interesting with traveling and all that. And I was at the IntelNet conference, and what a great turnout! It's great to see everybody.
Yeah, I hate I missed that, but yeah, I'll definitely make next one.
Yeah, I think next one's going to be in Florida, maybe St. Petersburg or Orlando. I can't remember which one they said.
Yeah, I think Orlando. Yeah.
Orlando. Yeah. Okay. And that was. Florida's Florida. And that time of year is always a good time to go.
Yeah.
So I know we had Rachel Roberts on a couple episodes ago a while back, and we were talking capital murder, but we were talking more along the lines of the importance of timelines and things like that. And I wanted to come back on and just do more on capital murder, because there's just so many aspects of it, and so many different things that an investigator is important for. And you've got extensive experience on that, so I thought it would be cool to dive back into that. But before we get into all that, tell me what you've been doing since we've been chatting.
Gosh, since we've been chatting, I've been just busy, like you, kind of all over the place. We're still growing our business, still adding investigators. We're expanding into South Carolina, just expanding our service lines, growing our digital forensics side of it. So it's been really crazy.
Yeah.
Which is good. It's a good kind of crazy. I love it.
Right. And then we had done an episode a while back also about expanding your business, and when is it time to make that move. So I guess we're in that growth phase.
We are in it. Yes.
We were talking offline about the struggles of labor. I think we all have labor pains these days, right?
Yeah, it is. I've been doing this now 36 years. March is my 36th anniversary, and it's just always a struggle to try to find good investigators.
Yeah. Yeah, no one's going to do it as good as yourself, and when you find people that do, you do everything to hold on to them. So that's good. Yeah, that's good. I know South Carolina's got an event coming up too in May, I believe, as well, right? The Scally Conference.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that is coming up.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to make that one. I know I got invited to it. I think I have a scheduling conflict.
Is it Myrtle Beach?
It's in Myrtle Beach. Yeah.
Myrtle Beach. Yeah.
Myrtle Beach again. I was there last year. They did a joint thing with IntelNet, and that was a lot of fun.
Right.
It was like the first live event coming out of COVID, so nobody knew what to expect.
Well, and Myrtle Beach is kind of a different animal unto itself as well.
Right. So for folks who don't know you, 36 years experience, just a brief overview of what type of investigative work you do and what your background is.
Yeah. So, I started in March of 1986. So it's kind of hard to believe that it's been 36 years. And we do a wide variety, like most people. We cover the surveillance, plaintiff's defense work, background investigations. I personally am doing a lot of Title IX cases right now, but I did spend, a good 20 years doing primarily first degree and capital cases.
Right.
I don't do them as much anymore because our state has decreased our indigent rate. So, back a number of years ago, you could make a decent living doing it, but they just kept decreasing our indigent rate. So I stopped taking indigent cases about 6 years ago.
So for folks who don't know what that means, indigent, what exactly does that mean?
Yes, court appointed. So, the court will appoint an attorney, and then the attorney applies for, funding for an investigator. And North Carolina has always been fairly liberal with their funding, but they started just setting hourly rates, so they didn't just pay you your normal hourly rate. And then a couple of years ago, they even started putting out guidelines on really what investigators could do. I mean, even to the point where, okay, you don't need to read all the discovery, read your witness statements. And I'm like, I can't properly investigate a case if you're going to tell me what I can read and what I can't read.
Right.
So I think those limitations have really just hurt the investigative side of the defense bar here.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And for folks who don't know what Title IX is, can you break that down for them?
So Title IX was, I think, enacted in the late 80s. And really the purpose of it was to just make male and female sporting events equal. If you had funding for a men's soccer team, you had to have a women's soccer team. If you had scholarships for men, you had to have scholarships for women. And so it obviously encompasses sexual harassment. And the colleges have really just taken it to an extreme and are using it for, I even have a case where they're using it for off-campus events. And so incidents that happened off campus that with two students. And so I've done a lot of that recently. And unfortunately, there's just so much of it going on.
Right. We'll come back to that on another episode.
Okay.
You said it makes you angry, so I don't want to make you angry.
I get angry because the process, and when you're in court and you're in a trial, there is a process. Your client gets his due process, his or hers, and so you have an opportunity to present evidence, to ask questions. Title IX is way different than that, and so it gets frustrating.
Yeah, for sure. I believe it. Okay, so let's dive into capital murder. Like I said, we touched on it a little bit a few episodes ago, but I wanted to get your perspective on it. Soliciting that type of business, getting that type of business, and then following through to make sure that you're doing everything you possibly can. So break it down to me. How does one person who's interested in getting that kind of work feel like they have a knack for it to really get into doing that kind of work?
I think the most important thing is that you have to get connected with a handful of attorneys. It's got to start with one. Mm-hmm. In fact, when I started, I had one attorney who I was very young, who just, had a lot of faith in me. And he was really an investigator at heart. So he enjoyed the investigative side of it as much as everything else. And so I was able to just work alongside him, just doing case after case after case. All he did was court-appointed indigent work. And so I just learned so much, from him. So I think if you get an attorney that you can work closely with, right, and then go from start to finish, from the time that you are appointed on the case and see it through to either a plea or trial. Trials are great. They give you the most experience because you do actually get to see, the fruits of your labor. And so I think that's just how you have to get started. You've just got to find an attorney that's going to have some confidence in you based on whatever experience level you have at the time, and then just be willing to learn and just be a sponge.
So where would you find these guys? Like at bar association events, your typical Yeah, do you
I mean,
troll the criminal courthouse handing business cards out? Like, how do you do that?
I mean, you laugh about that, but in the late 80s and early 90s, before internet,
Yeah.
this is true. It's a true story. If I needed a case, I would go to the courthouse and I would walk. I would act like I was going to the clerk's office, and I would see 5 people. Hey, Jan, I got a case for you. Call me next week. So really, so how would you find that? If your county or area has a public defender's office, that might be a good place to start, because a lot of the attorneys that come out and start doing indigent work come from the public defender's office. So you just can get connected that way.
Right.
If you have a defender's office that's large enough that has investigators, you could kind of reach out and make that connection there.
Sure.
So that could be an option. Invite them to lunch. Most attorneys will go for a free lunch, and then once you get to know them, that can blossom from there.
It's interesting. In New York here, they got to a point, and this is all pre-COVID, where law firms were starting to have policies that vendors, folks like you and I, were not allowed to bring lunch into their employees. I guess it was getting to be like too much, too out of hand, or everyone's like getting fat, just eating all these catered lunches that were coming in. A bunch of my clients, they're like, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. It's not allowed. Right.
Yeah. I mean, lunch and learns are great. I mean, it's definitely a great way to get your name and, just get in front of them and just kind of talk about your services.
Sure.
But it really, in my experience in the criminal defense world, it really only takes one. Yeah. Once you get one attorney and you have a successful case, and they see how you work, and they see that you're thorough and that you're ethical, and that you're, you know a lot, you're experienced, but you're willing to learn more, then I think that person's going to tell somebody else, and they're going to tell somebody else. So it's going to grow from there.
Yeah, that happens a lot, where, attorneys lean on one another for resources.
Absolutely.
And that is a real deal. And even going back to the whole lunch thing. So, bringing in lunch is pretty much a dead end now. But what's not a dead end is the concept of doing training via Zoom for employees. So like,
right.
Some of the things that we do, we offer, hey, we'll come on and we'll talk to your staff, for 35, 40 minutes, grab a couple of Redwells, some cases that you're having trouble with, and let's talk about them, free of charge. Hey, let's just spitball these things. And if we can help you, that would be great. Right. So like that type of concept, I seem to find is working pretty well with the stuff. And, I'm not having all that extra caloric intake. So,
Yeah. And I truly love brainstorming. So, I mean, I tell attorneys all the time, just if you have a case and you just don't know if it's an investigation worthy, just run the facts past me. I'm happy to just kind of talk about it, talk through it. We may come up with ideas together. Maybe we can help. Maybe I can point you in another direction.
Sure. Okay. So we're going to jump out and take a quick break. And when we come back, I really want to dig more into, the whole process of capital murder cases and how that works. So we talked about soliciting business here, but let's take it a step further. You've got your first client or somebody who's willing to give you a shot, and what that looks like. So everybody sit tight, and we will be right back.
The creative professionals of Redline Forensic Studios come to work every day with one goal in mind: to create credible and compelling visuals that help you win tough cases. Redline services, such as video enhancement and animation, are the critical assets you need to leverage your case. Visit the website today at redlineforensic.studio. That's redlineforensic.studio.
I want to talk to everybody today about ScopeNow.com. ScopeNow has been a big-time sponsor of this program for quite some time, and I just love their service. I've been using them since the beginning. I'm one of their beta customers, and it's been so awesome to see them grow into the business that they are today, and just how they just keep reinventing themselves and pushing themselves to get more and more information. What it comes down to is ScopeNow is a tool that you definitely need to use if you do social media investigations, any internet research, and really spending less time digging around and looking for information. I think is one of the best points of how ScopeNow can help you. Their AI platform, their analytics are amazing. you really get an idea of what you need. You're reducing the time, you're reducing the manpower that you're spending on doing this research, because they're essentially doing it for you, and they're doing it correctly, which is most important. One of the new things that they're actually offering is this flagging system where you can flag behaviors and really highlight and look out for fraud. If you're doing a lot of fraud research, this is a fantastic tool, and you can set up alerts. So you have particular people that you're looking at, you can actually set up alerts to get notifications when the criteria that you set up is actually is flagged and goes off. It's really, really amazing. And their relationship and association analytics are top notch, really cutting edge and really, really cool. When they brought that out on version 3, it was a game changer. I mean, really being able to see how people interact together and having that relationship analysis is really, really something that's cool. One of the other things about being involved with Scope Now is their ability to offer webinars. Their team is cutting edge on putting together and getting out really, really great content. If you're a member of Scope Now, if you know who they are, you've seen them around on LinkedIn, you'll know that they're constantly doing webinars on these new websites that are coming out, and they're really staying on top of it. And don't forget, any reports that you generate, you can actually white label those reports and put your own logos on and really make them look professional, which could equate to more billing for you as well. So check them out today. It's www.scopenow.com. They're a great company. They should be one of the tools in your toolbox, along with whatever kind of search engines you do. You need to make sure that Scope Now is a part of that suite. Scopenow.com.
Check out the PI Institute of Education at piinstitute.com. Since 1989, Kelly Riddle has been teaching on subjects such as surveillance, nursing home investigations, insurance fraud, domestic investigations, hidden assets, and accident scene investigations. The PI Institute of Education is a featured learning partner in the investigatorstoolbox.com. So check out the free content on the site, then visit the Institute for more great savings on additional classes. Are you in the New York metro area and are looking for work? Satellite Investigations is currently looking for a full-time field investigator. Visit Matt's profile on LinkedIn for more details and the links in the show notes. Good luck. Check out the latest issue of PI Magazine, available online or via hard copy.
And welcome back to PI Perspectives. This is Matt Spaier, your host. Today we are joined by Jan Barefoot. Jan, welcome back to the program.
Thanks.
Yeah, so great having you back. I love chatting with you. It's so hard to turn the recorder on when we start chatting because I'm like, I want to catch up. And then next thing you know,
right.
20 minutes is like, okay, we lost a lot of good material here, but let's get going.
That happened with me on a podcast last week, or pre-interview podcast. They were like, man, we should have been recording.
Jan, you talk too much. That's the problem.
Right.
Okay. So capital murder, before we took the break, we talked about how to solicit those type of cases and, where to go and how to kind of get into it. But let's dig in a little bit further. Let's talk about now, you've got the case now. So where do you start?
Well, I think you start by seeing the client. I feel like that one of the most important things that you can do in a capital murder case is develop that relationship with the client.
Right.
And frankly, sometimes the attorneys don't do that. If you've got a great attorney, you're just going to find all levels of attorneys that once you get into this kind of work, there's going to be some that really establish that rapport with the client. There's going to be some that, only visit them twice in a year. Yeah. And then I took it upon myself when I saw that the attorney was not establishing that relationship. I would cultivate that relationship more, because then that way the client trusts you. And, frankly, I feel like they deserve that. They deserve feedback. They deserve information from their defense team. And so I just felt like that was the right thing to do. So I feel like visiting the client, just, starting to gain that their trust, starting to gain, just to cultivate that relationship with them.
Mm-hmm. So a tip, right? If you want to do this stuff, get a pass that gets you into jail.
Yeah.
So in New York,
right.
They call it an attorney pass, but you can get, as an investigator, a pass. And it's a bit of a pain in the butt. You got to renew it every year. And I know, I don't go into jails a lot, but there are times where we've had to do it. I think the last time I was there was some sort of avian bird flu that was floating around in there. I was like, oh, great, fantastic, here we go.
Yeah, I mean, every
Yeah.
jail is different. I
Yeah.
mean, I've been in jails that are, where I'm actually meeting with the client in the kitchen because they don't
Yeah.
have a meeting area. And, sometimes you can't have a contact visit. I mean, I do feel like contact visits, if your jail or your facility allows that, it doesn't have to be every time that you go see them, but I do feel like that it's a good thing to have a contact visit with them where you sit down and you just really give them the time that they deserve to kind of talk about their case and hear about what you're going to investigate.
Yeah, I recently was watching that Inventing Anna on Netflix, just like every other investigator out there was like, oh, we got to watch this movie on fraud, right? And I had to chuckle a little bit when the character was going to see this fraudster in Rikers Island, because I know what it looks like.
Yeah.
Like, I know the whole process, the waiting for the bus and all that. And I had to giggle a little bit because, just going through it. But then when they got there, I'm like, oh man, it doesn't look like that on the inside. It doesn't, like, the functionality is not that way. It's like, it's more dramatic the way they're doing it, but it's not really the way it is. So yeah.
I always worry when I get, like, Central Prison in Raleigh is our most secure, maximum secure. And I always worry that the power is going to go out because all the doors are powered. And I'm like, I hope you have a ginormous generator here.
I did a federal jail in Brooklyn, Brooklyn, New York, and it was intimidating, definitely.
Yeah,
it was different.
Yeah,
and the case involved like our client getting attacked in jail by other inmates, and like the CO is allowing it to happen.
Oh wow!
And it's like, oh great, they're gonna see me with this guy here, and they're probably gonna decide to go another round.
Yeah,
I'm gonna get caught in the middle of
while you're there.
I'm like, great, someone please shoot me now.
Yeah, that's funny.
So yeah, it was there. So yeah, just a tip, right? Make sure you have the credentials to get where you need to go to do that kind of work, right? So it will require you to make visits, and you're talking about rapport, right? Just getting that rapport established with the client. So it's one thing to go through files and examine evidence, but it's another thing to have that personal relationship, which is definitely key, I would think, right?
Yeah, and I feel like it is important for them to know that you're working for them. And so once you initially meet them, of course, usually it's a meeting with the attorney. That's the way I typically worked. Is the attorney and I would go see them together. The attorney would make the introduction, and then we'd kind of go from there. But of course, you've got to have discovery. Sometimes I would get cases pre-discovery, and so we would have very little information, but at least we would we would know the scene, we would know the major players, and whatever information we had initially before getting discovery, we would still go with it. We'd go out to the scene as quickly as we could. And that's another thing that I feel like is important with regard to attorneys. Again, you're going to have some that are just very hands off. I mean, I've worked with attorneys from one handing me a piece of paper, a witness statement in a murder case saying, here, go interview this witness. And that's all they gave me. And I said, I kind of need more information than that. But I've worked from that level to an attorney who wanted to go interview every witness with me. And it wasn't because he didn't think I was capable. He primarily let me do the interviewing, but he wanted to lay eyes on the people. He was one of these attorneys that needed to get out there. He needed to see it. He just needed to hear it for himself. Yeah. And so I think as an investigator, it's up to us to try to find the balance. We've got to let the attorneys know what we need to do our job, but then we also need to let them know how to work the case as well. I mean, it's just an integral part. In fact, I was talking with a mitigation specialist yesterday that I hadn't talked to in about 15 years, and I worked with her extensively in the 90s and early 2000s. And she's complaining because the investigators that she's working with now, she would say, are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? And they would say, no, they haven't told me to do that.
Right.
And that she said she got that from 2 or 3 investigators. And so she was like, go investigate the case. You know, you're
Yeah.
the investigator. If you
Yeah,
have
full
funding
disclosure.
limitations, then certainly you've got to discuss those and get some direction and maybe prioritize things. But don't be afraid to talk with the attorney and say, hey, these are ideas I have. Let's prioritize. And, you know, what do you want? What do you want to see me do first? And then let's see where that leads us to.
Yeah, and I think taking that approach, I mean, it's just a win-win for everybody, right? You're managing expectations. You're letting them make the call on what they want, how they want to spend their budget. It's something that's well recommended. I mean, even, you know, I don't criminal cases, but on the personal injury side, same thing, right? When we're taking witness statements, like what's your angle? What are you going out here? You know, like what's your theory? What are you hoping this person says? Like that kind of stuff. And it's like, you think they're silly questions, but they're really not, because,
Right.
you know, it could really set things up, and it creates that comfort level, right? So the attorney says, wow, Jen really knows her stuff, right? She's there and she's asking these questions, and you know, I hired the right person, right? You want somebody who's going to ask those questions.
Exactly.
Instead of somebody that's just bulldozing and saying, oh, I do it the way I do it and live with it, or I don't do anything because I'm totally gun shy to pull the trigger on anything. I don't want to screw this
Yeah.
thing. But
Yeah.
it makes you look less professional, I guess would be the way to put it, right?
Well, and you know, you don't want to be a taskmaster. You don't want to be given a task to do and go do it and come back. That's not a good investigator. You're not using your investigative brain if you function that way. I mean, like on the cases that I worked, I mean, I worked with the mitigation specialist, as I just mentioned. If we needed a crime scene expert, you know, I worked with them. I would meet them at the scene. And so you have to be, in order to be effective, you have to be an integral part of the defense team. It's not, you're not just the investigator, you are part of the defense team.
Right. Yeah.
And you need to think like that.
Yeah. And you got to be able to articulate and share evidence.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to tell the attorneys, you know, I don't really like that idea. I mean, it's their call, you know, they're the ones that are going to be trying the case, but the attorneys that I worked with, they really liked getting feedback because they're attorneys and you can pretend to be a juror. You know, you're just a layman. You're not a practicing attorney. So you can give them feedback that they should appreciate.
Yeah.
And then it's their decision what they do with it.
Whether to work on it. And then you could sleep at
night. Right.
You know?
Right.
Especially on these murder cases.
You know, it is a lot. You know, certainly capital is much more pressure than first degree. Yeah. And then you have certain clients that you feel like, you know, maybe they're guilty, maybe they're not guilty, but you tend to put a lot of pressure on yourself. In fact, I know several of attorneys who have just stopped doing first degree and capital cases because it is a tremendous amount of pressure.
So for folks who don't realize, what is the difference between a capital murder case and a first degree murder case?
So when you're charged, if you're charged with first degree murder, then the district attorney or your prosecuting attorney's office will then make a determination whether they are going to seek the death penalty. So that makes it a capital case. And so in North Carolina, when it's a capital case, it's automatically has 2 attorneys. And then you typically qualify for more funding for expert witnesses and mitigation specialists and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever had a situation where you've been told no from more funding?
Not that I can remember.
Yeah.
Federal, some, yeah. And back in the early 2000s, up until I stopped doing state court appointed work, it was rare, especially on a capital case.
Right.
So on a capital case, you may have to
think that they could overturn something, right? This person didn't get their, due diligence that they're entitled to, I guess you would have to prove that whatever they denied you would be something that would really important.
Yeah. I mean, and you don't have to let the funding people know what you're using your money for exactly. I mean, you certainly present invoices and so they're able to monitor that. But as long as the attorney, says, okay, this is something we really need to investigate and we need more money. And here, this person has a track record of being very efficient, with her time.
Right.
And so yeah, they typically will just give you what you need.
I would think the specter of due process would just be too much for them. And it's not like they're writing the checks, right? So
Yeah.
as long as it's like, I got to rent this Maserati to make sure I fit into the right location
Right.
to get the information
Yeah.
I need.
Yeah.
Right?
For
Right.
sure. For sure. But honestly, in North Carolina, they have slowed down. I mean, they were pretty aggressive with death penalty, seeking the death penalty in the late 90s and early 2000s. I don't think we've had anybody executed in maybe 9 or 10 years. So, I mean, we do still have people on death row. I think I mentioned earlier when I was on about the case I had last year, where we had an MAR filed, motion for appropriate relief, because the trial attorneys didn't do, their job, and this guy got death, and we ended up actually walking him off of death row last June. So that was.
When are they filming the movie, Jen? And who's playing you? That's the question.
Yeah. Yeah, that was. It was a great feeling, but it was sad in many aspects. It was 1984 murder. He was charged in 2004 with, I think I'm right on the dates, with from a DNA hit, and tried in 2009. So all this time, he's been up there with lots of delays, lots of appeals, and finally got the right attorneys that were handling it and got in front of a judge, and through just a series of a lot of things, he ended up getting to walk out.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely crazy. Yeah. You don't think this stuff happens in real life, like, oh, it's in movies. So, we just watch movies because they're entertaining. And it's a good story and all that, but
Yeah.
It's,
well, and part of that was, a very inexperienced trial attorney. I mean, he had sat second chair for one prior case, and this case was too much for him. He didn't know how to handle it, and so that was a big reason why the MAR got filed. And then another reason was prosecutorial misconduct. I mean, there was some information that was not disclosed in discovery. And I don't know if you know, but once you file a motion for appropriate relief, then you get the entire district attorney's file, not just discovery. You get their entire file, which is interoffice memos, notes. And so in those documents, we found information that they had known that a rape kit had been destroyed and had not disclosed that information. So, it was a series of events that just, happened, unfortunately.
So why are you only mad about Title IX cases? I mean, that would be infuriating to me, working that kind of stuff. If I found out some evidence was destroyed.
Yeah. Anybody that was working with me during that time around 2009 knew about that case, because I mean, it's public record. I'll just tell you the events. So the trial attorney, there was a potential for third party guilt, where a witness said, yes, I saw the guy at their house, and I heard him say, I'm not going to do it to you, but I'm going to get somebody to do it to you, because he owed the guy money.
Right.
So I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, that's a good avenue to go after this guy with third party guilt. And the attorney was like, oh, I don't really know about that. Well, as it turned out, and I knew this then, the attorney had represented that guy a couple of years before on a federal court case.
Jesus.
And so I said to him, I was not afraid to say to him, you have a conflict in this case. It's problematic.
Yeah. I mean,
this is a problem. You need to go after this guy. And he was like, oh, he's not a killer. And I testified at the MAR, and the DA asked me, she said, in your opinion, what effect did it have? And I asked her, I said, you're asking me for my opinion? She said, yeah. And I said, it is my opinion that he did not pursue third party guilt against him because he had previously represented him. Yeah. And I really felt like that he was afraid of him. I mean, he was not a nice dude. And that was my testimony.
Wow, that
And it
is
was
so
true. I
moving.
mean,
Yeah,
and
crazy.
I had voiced that opinion to another attorney who was sort of a mentor during the time. I said, I don't know what else to do. In hindsight, there probably was people higher up that I should have gone to voice
Right.
my opinion, but yeah, it was problematic. So you can't always assume that your attorneys know what they're doing in capital cases.
Yeah.
If you feel like something's not right, then maybe you can consult, with another attorney without naming names, or consult with someone out of state to say, hey, okay, this doesn't quite sound right. Talk me through it, or even talk to the attorney. I don't understand. Why aren't you doing this? Kind of explain this to me. And that does help you learn. It helps you learn case law. It helps you
Sure.
learn. I learned a lot about third-party guilt and what was required to prove that during that situation.
Right. Yeah, it's so interesting, and you factor in, like somebody's life. It's like, really, man, you're not going to recuse yourself. That's
Yeah.
that's pride. It's
Yeah.
gotta be pride. I mean,
Yeah,
that's really not a good thing.
definitely.
But you definitely do see it though. Fake it till you make it with some attorneys. Like, just because they passed the bar doesn't mean
Right.
they're a good trial attorney. Doesn't mean
Right.
they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good testimony to you. Just finding the right words to tap in and say something when you got to say
Right.
something,
And then with that, I would say definitely one of the key things, especially in a first degree and capital case, is really document your file.
Mm.
Because, when the appellate attorneys get into the case, I mean, sometimes they get the attorney's file, sometimes it might be 5 years later, the attorney says, well, I know I didn't keep that file. So sometimes the investigator and the mitigation expert is the place to dig and find information.
Right.
And so I think keeping a neat and tidy file and keeping it documented really well is really important. I would always, start my file with a witness list. I would do an Excel spreadsheet with a witness list. And as I go through discovery, I would list the particulars about the witnesses. And then I would do just a really quick summary of what they are, what they saw, or how they're important to the case. And, I had in that case in 2009, I had interviewed about 75 people. So I had a lot of information, a lot of notes, and a lot of data.
Right.
And so, I create a file folder for each witness. And then in that folder goes my notes, the criminal background that I did on them, if it's necessary, my research to find them. Everything goes in each witness file. So I think it's important to create a nice, neat, tidy, fully documented file, because in those cases, you don't know ever when you're going to need it.
Yeah,
So.
you may need it later. I mean, you got to have methodology. I'm
Yeah.
always so amazed talking to folks like yourself or Kitty Haley and all that. Like, how do you take on these monster cases, interviewing 75 people and all that? Like, how do you get your other work done? Like, where do you find the time, to work on your other cases too?
Well, I mean, in North Carolina at the time, it was a 2 to 3 year process to get to trial.
Mm.
So, I mean, in at the top of my capital game, as you might call it, I probably had 15 cases at a time. And so, sometimes there's lulls in cases, just like all the other cases that you work, that there's not anything that needs to be done. There's not anything that's going on. Then you might get an additional, piece of discovery, additional witness statement. You need to go interview that person.
Right.
And then, of course, as you get it up for trial, then, you've got to start with subpoenas and that kind of thing. And that's another thing that I did with my attorneys is, for the most part, I did all the subpoenas. I mean, they either signed them or gave me permission to sign them, but
Right.
that's one thing that they didn't have to think about. So I know the discovery really well. I know whose phone records we need to get. I know, if we need to get cell site information. And I even have, I have go-bys for motions and orders for that kind of thing. And of course they sign them and they read them. So I'm not practicing law, but for the attorneys that are really busy, that can be really helpful, is that I can say, okay, we need to get this person's phone records. We need to get this person's cell tower records. So we need to find an expert to, review, the cell site location to see, if what the government has come up with or the states come up with is accurate.
Right. Right. Don't worry. I think we're past any statute of limitations. You should be okay.
Oh yeah. Right.
Nobody saw you sign any attorney's name.
No, I mean
Never happened.
and those are attorneys. I mean, I'm certainly not telling you to go out and do your own subpoenas and issue them. You know, they're attorneys that I have a really close working relationship with, and I never did anything without their okay.
Of
So
course.
I might prepare it, email it to them, or back then, you know, some other method, and then get their approval. And then say, yeah, send it on. What?
We're just making jokes here.
Yeah, right. Definitely.
Definitely follow.
I think what I'm just trying to say, it's really important. Just don't be a taskmaster. You know, get in the case and you let your gut tell you what to do next. I mean, if you know you should go interview a witness and funding is there and there's no reason, if the attorney tells you no, then of course you're not going to do it. But you just need to get embedded in the case and just really know it inside and out and just use your skills in all aspects. It's not only about witness interviews. I mean, it's just not. I mean, again, I've gotten crime scene experts involved. You know, I've met with them, and then that takes me to something else. Again, mitigation, because I usually know the client's life pretty well. You know, I can interact with the mitigation expert to see, okay, how else can we benefit from mitigation work? And, you know, some mitigation experts will only interview witnesses. Some won't gather documents. And so in my case, my mitigation expert didn't really like to do documents. And so I would do that for her. And so, you know, I would get the documents, I would send copies to everybody, and then she goes to talk to family members. You know, she's the psychology side of it. So she would handle that side of it. Did you ever
find yourself, I mean, it would make sense for you to serve subpoenas on witnesses, you know, people you've interviewed already, you've got the rapport, right? You know, making sure that they're going to actually show up when you need them.
Yeah.
Had you ever find yourself doing trial prep with him, maybe going over the statement and just refreshing their memories and making sure that when they show up, they're going to say the same thing they told you maybe a year or two earlier?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I would probably just call it a re-interview, you know, just to kind of have them go through the story again. And if there's key, you know, it's really important to me that, you know, I don't do anything to change someone's story or twist it. You know, we could walk a fine line, honestly, because if you think about it, how suggestive you can be. I mean, we've seen law enforcement do it, right? You know, it's like, oh, really? You know, didn't you do this? And so for me, and I think for all investigators, it should be just really important not to do that. But I feel like it's okay if you remind them, well, I remember last year when we spoke, you did talk about, you know, this red car. Do you remember that now? And sometimes they might say, no, I don't remember that at all. And then in that situation, you know, they could use me as sort of a rebuttal witness. You know, they weren't lying. They just didn't remember it because it had been 1 or 2 years later.
Yeah, sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
So we're going to wind down here. And Janet, it's always great to have you on. I mean, I feel like it just could do hours. You know,
I know. I feel like I just got wound up. I could keep going.
So let's finish on maybe some of the common mistakes that you've seen investigators or people that try and get into this line of work make over time doing this.
Well, again, I think the taskmaster, you know, just don't be somebody that's a mistake. I think sometimes they're just not afraid to give their opinions. I think they're afraid to give their opinions to attorneys, and I think they shouldn't be afraid to do that. I mean, if the attorney doesn't like it, you know, it's fine. You still go do your job as good as you can. But I think the attorneys do appreciate a sounding board, especially those who don't have co-counsel if it's not a capital case, or maybe those sole practitioners that don't have somebody to just kind of bounce things off of. So I think that's really, really important. I think in North Carolina, we're a one-party consent, and so I record everything. Yeah. So I think that if you are in a state that you can do that, I feel like that's important. Yeah. And I've had that save me multiple times for
Okay.
people who would say stuff like, she told me that she was working for the police department,
Yep.
or she told me that she was working for the FBI,
Yep.
and just, it's not true. And so, I think recording, if you have that ability in your state, is really important. And I think just having an organized, tidy file, I think a lot of people lack those organization skills. And I've gotten files from other investigators or even new investigators that I've hired on, that I would see their file and I'm like, it's not what we want. This is what we want. And I actually, there were cases that I actually saved my file that I knew, it was a plea and I knew it would not ever have an appeal, but I saved my file.
Yeah.
So new investigators who came in, I could show them this is a neat and tidy, complete file.
Yeah. And having some sort of case management software, I'm partial to my sponsors, but
I know you are. Yes.
Yeah, but they're, do your research and, get a good case management system, because it really helps you stay organized. And you have that interaction back and forth with the attorneys too. If they have access to it, they can give you directions through it, and you have record of everything, right? So when you do have to go back a year or two later and say, like, man, I've worked on thousands of cases. How am I supposed to remember all this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very helpful.
And don't ever, I would say on a first degree or a capital case, especially, just never discard your file. Just never discard it. No matter what you think, it might be 10 years, just don't get rid of it. Just store it somewhere. I did have a case where the attorney had discarded or either somebody lost his file. I don't know which one had happened, and they relied on my file, and I had several file boxes of documents. And so they relied on my file. It was all they had.
Jan to the rescue again. So, if folks want to get a hold of you, Jan, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Our website is barefootpi.com. That's might be the quickest. We have a really easy number, 704-377-1000.
There you go.
Yeah.
Go. Well, thank you again. And I know we'll have you back on again to do Title IX at some point.
Absolutely. Always enjoy being with you, Matt. Thanks.
The co-host chair is gonna be warm for you.
We can do it.
We can totally
do it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and tune in next week for another episode. And I appreciate the support for everybody. And I'm going to say, like, real quickly, I got to say one thing. So I was out in Vegas, right? And I was hanging out with a bunch of people, and there was some guy that was at some other event that wasn't even at the event that I was at, that just came up to me and was like, "You're the PI Perspectives guy." And I was like, "Oh my God." Like,
nice.
Yeah. So, shout out to
That's
that dude.
very cool.
That was very cool. So again, thank you everyone for supporting and, tuning into the show and just doing all this. And we'll catch everybody next week on the next show. Take care.
Thank you, Jan. She's always a great guest and has so much great information. These cases are very impactful if done properly. We'd also like to thank Crosstracks, IRB, PI Institute for Education, Satellite Investigations, and our new sponsor, RedlineForensic.studio. Now, have you thought about joining Investigators Toolbox? Now's the time to get on board and join the fastest growing digital community for investigative professionals. Use code PIP201836 to save 10% on membership when you join. If you have a question or a comment about the show, email Matt at matthews@satellitepi.com. You can also find him on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. We'd like your feedback to bring you the best shows possible. And we'll be back next week with a new show, so make sure you tune in and stay safe out there.